do think it is a cynical move in a general election campaign to try and wage another phony culture war. But on the very specific policy, what I would say is that Liberal Democrats have always said that if there is any confusion amongst service providers, then more guidance can be provided. But we don't think that the Equality Act needs to be picked apart.
Ed Davey seemed to spend his first week of campaigning in a wetsuit. It certainly got him and his party some much needed attention, and he fell repeatedly into Lake Windermere and then a couple of days later careered down a waterslide in Somerset. Will the Lib Dems deputy leader jump in after him? She's Daisy Cooper and is on the line now. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
Why does Ed get all the stunts? Do you remember I said to you, we spoke about a month ago, and I said, will Ed Davey ever be fired out of a cannon? You weren't really able to rule that out. But why does he get to do all of them? And can you rule out him being fired out of a cannon?
Well, all of these stunts are absolutely top secret, and there are some that even Ed doesn't know about until he arrives. So whether or not there's a cannon involved, I honestly have no idea. But what I can say is that these stunts, we believe that we should take our politics very seriously, but we don't take ourselves that seriously. And every time Ed does one of these stunts, it comes with a very serious message. So when, for example, he was on the paddleboard in Lake Windermere, he was talking about the fact that Liberal Democrats have led the campaign to end raw sewage dumping in our rivers and seas. And when he was at the water park, he was talking about our pledge to put a mental health expert into every single primary and secondary school to tackle the explosion of mental ill health amongst young people. So I think the stunts are doing their job. They're getting us in the news, and they're giving us a platform to talk about what we're offering voters in this general election.
Is there a danger? I applaud politicians who don't take themselves too seriously. I don't want to be po-faced about it, but is there a danger that actually people have a sort of patronising relationship with the Lib Dems? They sort of say, oh, look, there's Ed Davey doing something silly again on his summer holidays. And actually you lose the message a bit.
Well, I hope that won't be the case. The fact is, I think many people will have seen the serious side of Ed before. Not only has he been a climate minister, was he responsible for almost quadrupling renewable energy in the country, but he's talked in incredibly open and raw terms about being a family carer as well, looking after his nan before she died, and now being a sort of family carer for his disabled son. And I think it's important that people can see the lighter side of Ed as well, whilst he's delivering these very serious messages about sewage and mental health and everything else.
What's the ambition in the election? Is it to be the third party? Do you have an ambition to be the second largest party? Is that even in your conversations at all?
Look, we're in second place to the Conservatives in around 80 seats around the country, and we want to win as many of those as possible. So look, we're not going to take a single vote for granted. We're not going to take a single seat for granted. We've got a laser-like focus on winning as many of those as we can between now and the 4th of July. So let's see how we go.
And Davies yet to visit a single Labour-held constituency. You're really going after the Tories. Do you think that Labour will do a better job than the Tories?
Well, quite frankly, I think at this stage, pretty much anybody's going to do a better job than the Tories, aren't they? The Conservatives are in such a mess, and that's why lifelong Conservative voters are switching to other parties, including to the Liberal Democrats, in those seats where we're the key challengers to the Conservatives. What lifelong Conservative voters themselves tell us as Liberal Democrats is they just don't recognise the Conservative Party anymore. They've had the lying and the law breaking from Boris Johnson. They've had Liz Truss, who crashed the economy and sent mortgages spiralling. And Rishi Sunak has just been a failure on everything, particularly the NHS and the cost of living. So they simply don't recognise that party. And that's why they are turning to other parties, including the Lib Dems, in those key seats where we're the challengers.
We had Kemi Badenoch on earlier. She wants to challenge the Equality Act. Do you think that someone who declares themselves as a woman should access women's spaces?
Well, I think we should see this for what it is. I do think it is a cynical move in a general election campaign to try and wage another phony culture war. But on the very specific policy, what I would say is that Liberal Democrats have always said that if there is any confusion amongst service providers, then more guidance can be provided. But we don't think that the Equality Act needs to be picked apart, because it already includes really hard fought for and hard won rights for both women, for trans people, and for lots of other people with protected characteristics as well.
Are you comfortable with the idea of some? Because this boils down to, I tried to get this with Kemi Badenoch, to practicalities on all this question. Is it acceptable for a trans woman, someone who says that they're a woman but biologically was born male, to enter a women-only space. Is that acceptable? Is that something that you're comfortable with?
So the Equality Act already has exemptions to protect women-only spaces, female-only spaces, and so there are exemptions in there for single-sex spaces. And if there's any confusion whatsoever, then extra guidance should be
But what should the
published.
rules be? I mean, I understand the point you're making. There should be guidance. They don't need to change the law. But I'm just interested, like, where do you draw the line? Where do you draw the line between saying someone who says they're a woman, who identifies as a woman, how much access should they have to women-only spaces?
So look, I think this is actually really quite a complicated subject,
Yeah.
and I don't think you can have a single rule that applies everywhere. So let me give you a quick example. Imagine that a trans person is involved in a car accident, right? And they're admitted to hospital and they're unconscious. There's a question that medics have to decide about where in the hospital that person should be treated. Imagine you have a trans man who still has a womb and needs a hysterectomy. There's a question for that hospital about, well, actually, which bit of the hospital should they be in to be able to access the right kind of medical care, and to make sure that the right kind of nurses, they have access to the right kind of nurses. These are not questions that politicians can legislate for in detail in every single situation, but there does need to be guidance so that people who have to uphold these rights and balance the principles of fairness and safety and inclusion feel empowered and able to do that. So I do think there should be more guidance, but I don't think we need to unpick the Equalities Act.
Interesting stuff. But before you go, there was a piece in The Economist this week. I don't know if you saw it, Daisy Cooper, which said, "What's the point of the Lib Dems? They're nice, they like raincoats, and they don't like sewage or power." And that's the knock on you, that you like your stunts, your Tory bashing, your niceness. You don't actually want to dirty your hands with actually compromising and doing things and being the people who make decisions. You want to be splashing about in Lake Windermere, not actually directing the ship of state.
Look, I think what Ed Davey has said a number of times is that Liberal Democrats don't just care about who's in power, we care about who has power. There's a reason why we're in favour of devolution. It's because we believe that power should be devolved to local people. Up and down the country, there are Liberal Democrat councillors who are running councils who do have power, who are protecting local services, who are protecting our environment. Of course, if you get elected as an MP, you want to have the opportunity to change the country, to change your community as well. So I think that's an unfair suggestion. And it's just unfortunate that we have this very broken electoral system, which means that the number of votes that we receive isn't always reflected in the number of seats. But that's why we have a very targeted strategy going into this general election to target those seats and to get as many Lib Dem MPs elected as possible so we can be a greater force in the next parliament.
Daisy Cooper, thank you for joining us.